saying that you're done with a project, with art, with creating, with a vision, with whatever, is really important to then getting feedback. And feedback is really what creates iteration. And iteration is really important to success. You also have a responsibility in the feedback loop. Once you get whatever response is, to then interpret that appropriately, filter it appropriately, use it,
the
wield
reflection
it.
piece.
The reflection piece, to make that feedback a positive, utilized thing, object in the iteration. All right, so we are here in the studio. Don't laugh at that.
Quite the studio.
And we're listening to Eric Cantona when he won an award for like the UEFA Soccer League. It was like the President's Award or something like that. Not entirely sure what the award is for, but his speech went super viral for not making any sense. Like no sense. You listen to this speech, Google it. Eric Cantona, UEFA. UEFA, if you're not a soccer fan, I have a little bit less respect for you, but listen to it anyway. UEFA is UEFA. And you listen to this speech, just prepare to not have a clue what's going on.
He may have been on drugs.
It's quite possible. There are a lot of stories that floating around about what he was
or had
doing.
A few drinks.
He probably had probably quite a few. But this we're laughing at this speech because
football.
It ends like you don't think it's over because it just gets weird and philosophical and strange and talking about cells and gods
Cells
and
multiply.
being humans and war. And then it's like, I love football.
I think right before I love football talks about war.
Yeah.
Like literally the word before.
The only thing that will kill us is like, if we figure out the science, the only thing that will kill us is accidents, crimes, and wars will multiply. 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 And then I love football. It's a great speech. What's funnier though is watching the audience in the middle of this speech that clearly has no idea what's going on. It's fantastic. So check it out. Highly recommend. You need a giggle.
They weren't as high as he was.
Not at all. Yeah. Whatever. If you're in that crowd listening to that live, the other question is like, do you clap? Because you kind of have to, but I'm sure everyone in there was like, what the hell was that? Anyway, welcome back to the Get Out of Your Own Way show. Today, we're going to talk about, connected to this speech and why we're sharing this story. We're going to talk about ending and how to stop talking when you said too much.
Well,
I'll just stop now.
It's going to be tough for you.
I'll just stop now. And we're done. See you next time. The
kettle black, calling the kettle black here.
What we are going to talk about is how punctuating, ending, stopping your development, your project, your book, your whatever can actually be a really challenging process, as is stopping something that's not good for you, stopping something that you know doesn't fit in your long term, and you might need to shed it, you might need to let go of it, you might need to say no. So we're going to talk about that, like what it means to stop and what it means to
just a little context. Like we see what we do as art, right? And the on calls that we have with clients that are kind of the art, consider what they do also art. Struggle with when is it done? Yeah.
The entrepreneurship in many ways is art. You have this degree of creativity that's a part of it, regardless, and you're always approaching from multiple angles to remain creative.
Well, I'm just going to keep adding context to it. We also know the people who stifle the creative and have a very hard time moving forward because of that.
Yeah, that's well said. And if you're listening, what we mean by stifle the creative is not like your business partner or someone else's idea. What we mean is the creative side of you that has all these ideas and is sort of chaotic by nature. Art denotes this release of the walls and the boundaries and the order that we'd like to adhere to. And if you're coming from, W-2 or you've got a job,
or just the old educational system,
or you've been alive, you're probably going to deal with way more order, and the world forces you into like comply with these lines versus break them. And yet we celebrate the people that break them for a long time, and then we usually turn our back on them. But the other way that
they're meant to be broken,
they have to be in order to create any kind of like abnormality and success, right? Like I've been thinking about this a lot lately. You're either a master or you're mediocre. Those are your options. The mastery lives on the high end of the bell curve. Mediocre is everything else, and that requires you to break a lot of the rules and try new things and be creative. But we were also talking about how in the production of something big, some kind of really cool dream, we work with a lot of guys that are men and women that are already successful, and they're looking for that what's next. And you might be looking at what's next too, and thinking like, well, how do I get there? And what's it look like? And all those things start to percolate when you get into that process, when you actually commit to it. The hardest part of it is saying, I'm done with any kind of art. Could be writing a book, doing a painting, could be
this nice painting,
cooking
behind my head.
Could be that painting. At some point that had to be done. I think even home improvement projects are like that. When you're designing a kitchen or.
I know when I write, even when I'm writing like newsletters and stuff,
for sure.
At some point it's just done. It's got to go.
Yeah. And in that, so whatever your process is, whatever the thing is that you're doing, maybe you're designing a product, maybe you're working on a sales pitch, maybe at your job. Well, we're not really skewing that way, but maybe you have a job and you're like, there's a task that I need to be working on, or there's a long-term goal that I'm working towards, or, you're building a new marketing campaign. You're trying to get your job description right for your next hire. All of those things fall into this category of creating. And I think job descriptions for a role that you're hiring is a great one, because you want to get it right in all of those categories. You want to get it right. I want this to be correct. And as soon as you get trapped in that thinking, you're totally screwed.
Well, this is my experience, even with something like that. I could create the most perfect outline, job description. When that hits a human being, you have no idea how it's going to break apart, respond. It's easy on paper, but once it encounters a person, you have no idea what it's going to. Because there's a creative side to that person.
Yeah, the experience
that goes beyond a written piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although he uses paper, I don't know.
So today's conversation is really about the end, the stopping point that you define for yourself or your project. And if you think about art, right? Think about sitting and painting on a canvas. Well, the hardest part of painting on a canvas is getting to a place where you're like, I'm done.
You should spin the camera a bit and show them your own piece of art.
So that piece of art has been done for a long time. It's kind of like tucked behind the light.
That was hanging in your last place, or last couple of places.
I've had it for years.
Even in Baltimore.
Yeah. I've had it for years. And I actually remember painting it because I was going to do another layer. And this is the constant argument and tension in art and anything creative, business or otherwise. It's like just one more little bit and it'll be perfect. Then it'll be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you're like 19 days in, still's not done. Or you're going to rewrite chapter number 3 again for the 15th time, or you're going to rewrite the newsletter for the 17th time. Like it perpetually takes more time if you don't get to a stop.
And something like that, I just had this conversation, I think is a great tool for reflecting on. If you're doing it there, more than likely you're doing it in all aspects of your life. You're doing the same thing. Just one more layer, just one. Like, it's never enough.
Just one more.
And I mean, that's one of our own core beliefs about that. You are already enough.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to play itself out in doing something like that, like doing that piece of artwork. because all that stuff just kind of comes up when you're doing something creative.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, very naturally. There's this idea of like one more that's good, right? Can you try again? Can you? Ed Milet's done a really good job of making that his brand, right? Like one more day.
Yep.
Can I commit to the process? Can I commit to the art one more? And that's really positive. Where it becomes a negative and swings to the other side is like one more layer, one more edit, one more change.
Yeah, the difference there is this feeling of I'm not enough plays itself out on the canvas.
Yeah, it's not enough.
Ed Milet is, you get to that breaking point in the gym, do one more.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of this idea of like punctuate it imperfectly and send it. Whatever that looks like, that might be an email. Man, I've sent so many emails where I look back and I'm like, I probably should have like proofread that. But very few of these things have the negative consequences that we think they do. So if
it's all in your head.
It's all in your head. So we have a lot of clients that are in the process of transitioning from their job to their dream. And it's really special to guide them, through that journey. But that journey is often documented by like, it's got to be perfect. My sales pitch has to be better, or, I've got to get this right before I launch it.
Best website.
Man, business cards, like fucking logo, like name it. It's so much stuff to get perfect.
Business cards are so dominant.
Dude. I don't even know why we have business cards anymore. I mean, we don't, but
I mean, electronic one.
What ends up happening is if you get and you might be stuck here, like be really honest with yourself. If you are, you might be stuck in like, I need to get it right. What we tell ourselves, we need to get it right. Or like, I want to get it better. I want to get it ready. And it will never be that. It will never, ever, ever get there. And the reason it will never get there because of this lie that we live in. So here's the lie. What we say we're doing is we're improving it, that we're like iterating it, that we're going to get our sales pitch better and better and better. So we sit and we look at the screen and we put it in ChatGPT and we talk to ourselves about this. And then we're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to revisit this tomorrow. I'll just tweak it. I'll just go through and edit it again. We say that we're iterating it, we're improving it. In reality, though, we're not. What we're doing is we're delaying. We're not putting an end to the development and then launching. We're just deferring and avoiding.
Delaying putting it out into the universe.
Into everything else.
Yes.
So here's the rule about iteration. If someone else does not come in contact with what you've made, it's not an iteration. It's just delaying and avoiding. So if you're sitting there and you're like, man, I've been working on my vision. I don't want to share it yet. We work with all of our work centers around like, you got to have a big vision for your life. If you don't have a big vision, we have a formula for you. But in this idea of like, I'm working on my vision. I don't want to share it yet. By doing that, you are not iterating your vision. You're not improving your vision. All you're doing is avoiding improving your vision, because there's only one way you can improve your vision, and that's to get someone else involved in it to give you feedback, or to just express it to where you can actually feel, does it intuitively align with you? Does it feel right? Does it sound right? Then you'll tweak it.
So I think the resistance is the most important piece. What's the resistance to, I mean, I know the answer for at least myself. What's the resistance to putting it out into the world?
It's not good enough. It's not good enough for whoever is listening.
Or there's also fear there. There's a fear.
For sure. Yeah. Well, they're tied, right? It's like, I'm afraid that this might happen because it's not good enough.
Yeah, they're going to reject this. People are going to criticize it.
No one's going to buy it. If I say my vision out loud, people are going to think I'm silly, or they're going to tell me that I'm dreaming too big, that I'm lost in the clouds. It might be that, I don't know, the art's shit, or I'm not very good at what I do, or whatever.
Like in my case, when I first started writing years ago, it was hard to put it out there because there was, for me, writing is also very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like a personal attack.
Mm-hmm.
If someone is criticizing it,
every business owner gets that. Because if someone says like, hey, I don't like your coaching.
That's their baby. That's their baby. We even use that language.
Yeah. So someone could say the same thing about like our logo, and I would be hurt by it, not for very long, but I'd be hurt by it because it is so personal, right? It's like, that's a representation of me.
Yeah.
Someone attacks the vision.
It's manifested through us. And once it's out there.
Yes. And that's the interesting part about connecting the idea of art in, because when you see it that way, now you understand why when someone says like, oh, your SaaS software doesn't solve my problem, we see that as someone attacking our art. Mm-hmm. It's as if we're at home with a fucking crayon drawing a stick figure and going to dad or mom and saying like, look, and they're like, what is this trash? Right? That's what it feels like.
Right.
And rather than letting ourselves punctuate it and say like, hey, it's done. It's enough as it is. It's imperfect, but it's done. We reserve the completion of it for the fear of what might happen.
And I'm going to stress the point I made earlier. If I do that there, where I avoid the kind of the ending of it, then I'm doing that everywhere in my life.
For sure.
More than likely.
Oh, we have the same excuse for everything, right? Well,
I don't end a relationship. I don't.
Yeah. Don't end a relationship. Don't start a relationship. I don't sign up for the marathon. I don't sign up for a personal trainer. Like, dude, I think about this so much. Every time I've gone to the dentist, I hate going to the dentist. I got so much fucking trauma from the dentist.
First of all, if someone enjoys the dentist, like, please let us know.
Yeah.
Be curious to meet
please
someone.
Send us an email. And explain to me what you actually like about the dentist.
I can't wait to go to the dentist.
But here's what's funny. To go to the dentist, like the 2 weeks before the dentist are the most serious, like, hygiene ever. Right? You're just like, I'm going to fix this right now. It's never going to happen. The whole point is to go in so they fix it, right? But no, it's not how it works. Like, so much of our world is about like,
I'm horrible at flossing.
Prep.
And then I go to the dentist.
And they're like,
and they tell me about it. I'm like, I know, you really don't need to tell me. I'm already aware of it.
Yeah. We all know this.
Right.
But I think over and over and over, we wait for whatever the big dream is. We wait for like the amount of doneness we need, the amount of right or correct to start, right?
So that doesn't lead to then settling for something less.
It can. It can also lead to never starting in the first place, which I suppose is settling for less.
Right, settling.
But in this lie is like, I need these conditions to be correct or right for the next step. So we almost put the next step behind us, and then we can never catch up to it. So with a painting in particular, like that painting that if you're here on YouTube, the one that we shared.
Yeah, I forgot people are listening. They might not see it.
Yeah. So if you happen to look at that one, that piece is like 37, maybe 42 layers of paint. And every day it was just like another layer, another layer, another layer, another layer. It's a very complex abstract. And it has a lot of meaning to me. One of the things that I remember most was it was on the floor where I lived, giant tarp, paint everywhere. And I had done it for, I don't know, like 13 days, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but if you have it's 5 foot by 3 foot painting on the floor, it wasn't even that I lived in a big
great for covering up big holes behind the wall.
Yeah. It is great for that. But if it's taking up this room and it takes 13 days, it's really easy to let it sit there. So you might have a project, whatever your project is, in your business, for your website, for your personal brand, where it's like after 13 days, you get used to it. Then you're just like, well, this is what the floor looks like. And here's where it gets really fascinating, right? 13 days becomes 14, 14 becomes 16, 18, 21. Next thing you know, it's just like a permanent fixture on your floor. People come over, you talk about it, and it's like not that bad. When are you going to finish it? When are you going to publish your book? When are you going to press send on your email? When are you going to pitch the product? Whatever it is. And before you know it, you've made no progress. And then the worst thing of all happens. You start secretly beating yourself up because it's not out, and you're not working on it, and you're not moving it forward. And that's when the spiral starts to really eat you alive, where it's like, I'm never going to finish this work, or no one's going to buy it if I do finish. Well, why would I ever finish it in the first place? Or like, why would do I really want to publish this book? I'm not really sure. Like, is anybody going to read it? I don't know.
Yeah. Or all those people were lying to me. They really do. They're just saying it to be nice to me.
Yeah. All of the lies and insecurities will come to the surface. And I remember that after 13 days or whatever it was, I remember picking up like it was like a wedge tool with a flat edge to like smear paint in a straight line and then kind of like spread it. And I remember picking it up and being like, no, I'm done. This is done. And that was it. And like, it has not been touched since. The only thing I added was like my logo in the corner. That was it. I added like name date on the side. Cool. And I think something magical happens when you get to a place where you're like, it's done. Because then you don't have any more options. You don't have any more bullshit to be like, well, I don't know. Like, I guess I got to try to sell this thing. The cycle starts again, but at least it's fresh.
Yeah, then I'm just trying to think, how would I be in that situation? Then someone can say, well, you should have done this, or you should have done this, or you should have done that. There's still a level of questioning that can take place if you're not sure of yourself, because you're going to let other people influence how you think of it and how you see it.
Yeah. The hardest thing in any creating is I'm done. And once you say it's done,
the hardest of anything is saying it's done.
Yeah, good or bad.
Right. Like even a relationship is very hard to say it's done.
Yeah, definitely.
There's such a finality to that.
Yes. When it's done, then you can begin whatever's next. And you can iterate, right? I think back to like the first products that I sold. I sold them and then I got feedback and then you go do it. But until someone else has seen it or talked about it or gone through it or experienced it or bought it, whatever it is, you don't, there's a punchy comment. You don't have the right to edit it again. You have not earned the ability to go edit it.
Which is interesting. The fear is the feedback loop, but the feedback loop allows you to grow and be better.
And I would say that 90% of people, probably not the people listening, though I would argue that the other 10% have a different challenge. 90% of people do not want feedback.
Correct.
And the 10% that do, 9% of them are terrified of it. Only 1%.
Right.
Only 1% actually go get feedback.
Right. And give a shit
and like really care about it. Yeah.
It's hard.
It's very hard. It's very hard. But you haven't earned the right to get to like change it until you get feedback, because you're only able to see one perspective. That's why we exist, right? As coaches, our job is to be like, hey, have you thought about these 9 other ways to see what you're doing? Oh, now I can change it with perspective, right? With multitudes of angles.
I think in my years as a preacher, that every Sunday I had to go through the same thing, because there is a feedback loop whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
In that situation.
Anything public.
And and you have, what I've learned is, especially in a situation like that, I say one thing, someone hears it very differently.
Right.
And they're bringing their own lens into those words, which are just words.
Yep.
That's kind of, I think that's the point we have a hard time with, that I had a hard time with originally, was I didn't even say that. That's not even what I said. But that's the interpretation and the hearing by the other person where they are at it's what I said earlier with the job description. It's great to have it on paper, but as soon as it hits a person, it takes on a life of its own.
If there's anything I'm reflecting on, it's the number of times in particularly sales where the word or the phrase "I'm done" was really, really important. Because I would sit, man, and I would like map out like a document, right? Like a one-sheeter or one-pager. Then I map out like the website. Then I map out all this stuff. And I would constantly have to coach the team or share with the team, like, we're done. Like, we're done on Friday. You know, like, you get as far as you go on Friday, but on Friday the page goes live. And if there's typos, someone will find them. I guarantee you, we will get an email like, hey man, you misspelled the word money in here. Like, yeah, it's definitely going to happen. But again, you don't have the right to improve and innovate and iterate until someone else has seen it. You haven't earned that yet.
Yeah, and like so many other things begin to factor in. Who's giving the feedback, and is that constructive feedback or is that destructive feedback?
Right.
There's so many other factors that begin to
For sure
into it.
And you got to learn to filter it.
Correct, because there are some people I could care less what you think.
Yep.
Quite honestly.
Yep.
Because I know it's not coming from the right place.
And well, this could be a whole other sidebar, but like, you know a lot about a person.
Football.
I love football. You know a lot about a person the way they give feedback too.
Correct.
You can tell a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like no one that is above you will give you feedback criticizing your progress and your growth. People below you will though. They'll be like, "Oh, dude." I remember I got when my website first launched and I shared it with everybody. I think we did this for Money Club too. Like smattering of people that were great. Hey, I love this. Really appreciate that you did this. Like that makes a lot of sense. This might need some changing. I think of this. And then we just got like, this is stupid. Like, who do you think you are?
Yeah,
like,
what do they do at the Olympics with scoring? They automatically take the top ones and the bottom ones off.
Yeah.
They filter out those two things. Where's the middle of all of this that's going?
Yeah. What's the central theme here?
Yeah.
So to kind of encapsulate this, when
you won't.
I won't.
But go ahead.
I'll try. I can't edit until you give me feedback. You're like, hey, bro, this is stupid.
That's just dumb.
In art in particular, you get in this mode where, it's like layer. Or I want to tweak this corner or whatever. Same thing with websites. Same thing with marketing.
Ogres are like onions.
I'm not entirely sure I get that reference.
Layers.
Oh, layers. I love a good Shrek reference. So, you're like, I want to tweak this small stuff. That makes a lot of sense because I think we can all understand that that's a visual. But I think it would make sense to talk about other places where that happens. Like, again, writing, sort of like more artistic endeavors anyway. Blogs, even content. How many times you record the same piece of content over and over? Like, just put it out in the world. No one cares. So that sort of artistic side makes sense. But I do think that from a lens of business and vision and leadership, we also have the same block. How do you think it shows up in like less creative spaces? The same idea of like, I'm just going to wait until it's perfect.
Oh, I don't know. I have to give that some thought. I was going to ask you a different question because I'm curious, like what's your own experience? Kind of bring the humanity into it. What's your own, when did you feel like you were criticized when it really hurt, and yet you knew there was truth to it?
So I could hear the criticism and accept it,
and yet still fight it because you don't want to hear it.
Oh, that's all of it, man. I think if you're getting, I do want to come back to that question, but I'll answer yours. It's good feedback should sting. I do believe that. Sometimes you can hear the right feedback from the wrong person, or you just need to hear it 3 times.
Yes.
I think some of the most comical feedback that I've heard as a coach is like, yeah, like I've heard that before. And I'm like, well, you're about to hear it again. And then they'll hear it a third time.
You haven't heard that lesson yet.
Yeah.
Learn that lesson.
Or a 4th time. And then it's like, like so-and-so said it. I used to get that as an athletic coach. Like I would tell players all the time, like normal life stuff, like, hey, you got to contribute to taking out the trash, or like, hey, it's probably time you brush your teeth. Like sometimes it just can't be dad, or it can't be your close network. You got to get it from a third party. And again, sometimes we might be the first time you hear something, and then you hear it 2 more times, and all of a sudden it makes sense. I definitely struggle with the internal story when I hear feedback that's not great. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy for me to be like, oh, well, maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I'm not everything I thought I am, or, is this what everybody thinks?
That one thing can affirm the belief that you already may teeter on at times, but it'll automatically
definitely a shadow.
Told you so.
Yeah. It just sort of brings up your insecurity, your shadow.
Yes.
And I have learned to sit in that long enough to really ask the question of like, let's extract something from this and sit in the pain of it versus just like stay in the pain of it. Like it's okay to feel it. I think that's important. I never want to be to a place where I like can't hear any feedback. I think that's wildly unhealthy
for any leader.
For any leader, right? If you're actually a leader, you got to be able to sit in that.
Yeah, ultimately, you will be in your shadow all the time at that point.
Yeah, because then you'll do things to avoid criticism or feedback or whatever.
Yeah, I was thinking. So we're early on in my years as an administrator or pastor. I think the hardest thing to end was knowing I had to fire someone.
Okay.
And I held on to that person because I can only see the short-term pain of all of it. Okay. Because especially when you're in a parish doing something, it affects a lot of other people
for sure
in ways.
Well, any team cancer always does,
right? And so you're mindful of how the way I operate is I'm mindful of how things are going to play themselves out.
Yeah.
And all I could see is that pain. Originally, I would just like hold on, like I just could. How do I do this?
Yeah.
And I eventually learned like you got to just do it and pay the price and figure out what's going to happen.
Yep.
But that was originally a challenging thing for me was, and I mean, I've talked to enough clients to know that they're aware that they don't have the right people, but it's so hard to
don't want to cut it.
It's just really hard.
Yeah.
And hiring is a crapshoot regardless. Like you have no idea who you're getting when you're hiring someone.
Yeah. There's a lot there too to talk through. You know, I mirror the sentiment of like, as a leader, you got to be open to feedback. And again, if you really are committed to your craft, you have to welcome it.
I kind of just want to add one caveat to what I said, because there was a person that I resisted firing, and then I fired that person, and I realized quickly that most people thought that should have happened long ago, like even within a community.
Yeah,
but I was the lucky one that got to make the choice.
Yeah,
woohoo!
Yeah.
Others are often more aware before we, the leader, see it or want to admit it.
Yeah, and sometimes that's not easy for them to articulate. One, for like the politics of it all, but also like they may not. It's maybe more of a feeling than a like conscious.
More than like,
it's just like something don't feel right about this.
Yeah.
Like
I've had that too, where it's like
my spider sense.
My gut is like that person's not going to make it.
Yeah.
I was always like, I still need proof. I want evidence. I don't want to just fire someone to fire someone. But I like know right away that person's not going to make it.
Yeah. It's all around feedback, right? It's the avoidance of a feedback loop, and the only way a feedback loop actually works
is if it
loops. Like it don't work if it doesn't loop.
Is that why it's called a loop?
It's crazy.
I love football.
I love football. Yeah. That's the best way to end any speech.
Hey, podcast people, could we call that this podcast that?
I love football. But I'm thinking like in both the leadership role and in the creative role and in being led or working inside of a community, like the more you avoid a feedback loop, the longer this like infinite stretch of no progress really happens. And
well, and I'll add to that, because there's also like in the situation with people, it starts to feel like the task is insurmountable at the same time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I got to sell this painting. I got to pitch this product. Yeah, totally. Got to build a perfect website. One thing that's funny about business in this way is that the task list is infinite. You have so much to do, and most of it is done better and faster if you just build the sequence of like feedback loop. Like if you draft a website, an outline, and send it to people and go like feedback, and they send it, you have such better information than if you did 58,000 copies so fast, right? It's actually very easy.
Instantaneous as well.
Take a picture of the painting and send it and be like, hey, would you buy this? You will get such better feedback. But we're all afraid of criticism in a way that either pushes that forward to go get it, hold, or avoid. Like those are your options, right? The 1% go, I'm going to go get it. The 9% go, I'm going to wait till it's better. And then the others just, they won't even do it in the first place.
I think in terms of like that art piece or even my own writing, I had to get to a point where I often wouldn't put anything out there until I could kind of universalize it in the sense that I can separate myself from it a little bit so that it still wasn't something maybe raw in my own life. I had to wait. I needed to give some distance because I was also aware that this wound or whatever I was going through at the moment was still too fragile that it couldn't handle that type of criticism. So I often wait, and it wasn't a long wait typically. Can I universalize this experience so that it's not just about me in this moment? This is something everyone can experience, and I could separate myself a little bit from it.
Yeah. And you can't run, right? Like, I mean, you can, but you'll tire yourself out. So I want to go back to this like, where else does this show up? So firing is obviously one. That's a great business application. I think it also has to do with like getting help, whether it's a coach or a mentor or like you need a new accountant or, you're like, I don't know what to do with this marketing plan. Like we dance around it like, well, let me think about like, bro, you have no idea what you're doing. It's okay.
You need a little time to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the best calls and like this is a 1% mentality. So if you have this, know that you'll have it probably in most places, but here's how it shows up with us. I'll jump on a call with somebody. You'll jump on a call with somebody and they could ask 1,000 questions about coaching. At the end of the day though, it doesn't matter what number comes out. They're like, if I feel good about it, I'll make it work. That's the response, right? I'll make it work. We've had clients or prospects, I suppose, that are like, well, I want to talk to 6 clients. I want to follow up. I want to know your HTML password so I can check your website. Like, I want to see your metrics. How many podcasts do you download? Like,
the most common was I need to speak to in our case, it's often my wife. I got to speak to my wife.
Sure. I need to validate these things. Like,
good old Andy Elliott will punch that through.
Oh man. Yeah. Andy Elliott would definitely literally punch somebody through that. But what's fascinating is, again, at 1%, it does not matter. If you find the right fit, you figure it out. And it's okay to not have it figured out, but it's not okay to like not close the loop. If you're like, how much does it cost for a great coach? And you don't know that answer, I can tell you there's only one way to get the answer. You're going to have to talk to a couple coaches, figure out the bottom, figure out the top, figure out the middle, like go feedback loop. It could be the same for accountants. It could be the same for web designers, ad generators, social media managers. Like you can sit here all day long and be like, well, let's wait till we're ready. Like for what?
It's not the right time.
It's not the right time. The best excuse ever. I have found there was, I talked about this on a podcast like a long time ago, not ours, but one other, about how I got scammed out of like a lot of money for Forex trading. And that's that moment was really interesting in hindsight, because in that small window of time, I found money for something that I believed in. Like I found it. I mean, I didn't like hustle people for it, but I'm a squirrel, man. There's fucking acorns everywhere. I went through every account and I was like, okay, I got $2,000 here. I got $2,000 there. I got $10,000 there. Like I'm like pulling this stuff together.
You're like the little old grandmother.
Yes.
Just has it everywhere.
Little envelopes in cookie jars.
The little envelopes.
and like, I found it, right?
The fact that, the bank used to give you an envelope with cash.
It was like, I'm going to make this work. And, turned out to not be what it was. But that was a moment where I was like, oh, well, if I can find it for that, I can definitely find it for other stuff. So how do I think that way? Right? I'll find it. I'll make it work. What do I got to do? I'll make it work.
you know this, what I'm about to say. There was a question of that the person valuing themselves in that moment.
They're betting way more on them than they are on us.
Yep.
And that's not to say they aren't betting on us, because they really are. But yeah, if you can't trust yourself, like, you're gonna have a hard time trusting somebody else. I also think that there's a lot of people out here in this mentality. They want to spend $5,000 on a program, on coaching that, or on like something that's going to like radically change their life, so they can go make and sell a $50,000 product. But they would never buy a $50,000 product. Right? They would never do that. There's a massive incongruence, and that discrepancy is a broken feedback loop. Right? It's like, I'll do that. I'll pay that much when I get there. But you're never going to get, like, it doesn't work like that. The feedback loop's broken.
Yeah. You never get there. Wherever there is.
Wherever there is. Yeah. The idea of like, I can do all this when it's right, or I can do all this when the conditions are perfect, is a really pervasive thing in making change to an organization, right? We'll shift to remote work when it makes sense. Dude, I used to hear it. I wasn't.
Well, again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. Everyone around that person, that boss, that leader, whatever, knows that is total bullshit.
Yeah.
They already know that.
Yeah.
So don't do that to people.
No. Oh my God, it's the worst. Like, I go back to, I was coaching a couple people and some orgs, some like company work way back in 2019. And I would hear it all the time, man. Like, oh yeah, like, we're thinking about this going to remote or like work from home model, or, we're thinking about changing it up. Man, those were the people and the organizations that crumbled the hardest in COVID.
Yep.
Because there was like, well, we're going to wait for the right time.
It was a year later at that point.
Yeah.
About 2019, 2020.
It wasn't long down the road. But the organizations that really figured that out were like, it doesn't need to be perfect. Feedback loop it. We're going to share it with people. And if they don't like it, we'll change it. If they don't like it, we'll fix it. If it's not done right, we'll address it.
What I'm thinking of, maybe something worth touching upon, is there's really at least two feedback loops. There's the feedback loop of other people give me this feedback. How do you address the feedback loop that is? He opened a drink if you couldn't hear.
It's a seltzer water. Leave me alone.
How do you address the feedback loop that exists within me, exists within you, exists within us? Because that's often where the origin of the feedback loop that is distorted is in you.
So if I'm hearing that right, what you're saying is, how do you deal with feedback? How do you?
Because essentially, it's the feedback loop within yourself.
Yeah.
That is distorting other feedback.
Yeah, for sure.
It's Bruce. It's
that negative voice. Yeah. If you haven't tuned in very often, I gave my negative voice a name. His name is Bruce, and I highly recommend that you do that for yourself, just so you can segregate these things.
Skeletor is mine.
Skeletor is yours. So that's a great point. So I
know that's why I said it.
To encapsulate that, you have take action, and then you're going to get feedback from your audience, your environment, your team, your wife, your husband, your friends, whatever. That starts a loop. And then once that gets to you, in order to really close the loop, you've got to handle it and then put it back into the iteration and edits.
Correct. So, well, just one other caveat to it, because if you never go for the feedback from the others, the feedback loop within you is going to be distorted more than likely.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Well,
and then you're going to go looking for evidence once you do put it out there that, oh, see, I was right all along.
I was right. Yeah, you just missed your chance usually.
Yeah.
Well, I think the way to deal with feedback in a positive way, whether it's critical or positive, is to create space, like time, that allows you to really try to discern the message. Because positive feedback has with it its own degree of lies, just like negative feedback has its own degree of lies.
You're such a nice boy.
And truth.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had incredible compliments about my character and the way that I show up. And I've had people beat me up and tell me I'm a huge, raging red flag, right?
Right.
So it's okay, one, to have complexity. It's okay to have duality. If not, something's really wrong because you're probably lying to everybody.
And you don't have honest people around you.
True. You have yes people. Yeah. And a lot of what creates problems is having people that agree with you all around you,
yeah,
versus people that will challenge you. The other thing that feedback requires is a constant reassessment of what, like, your ownership. And it doesn't mean that you, like, there's this whole, like, Jocko Willink, like extreme ownership, own everything. And there is a degree of, especially as a leader of an organization, you've got to be willing to own it. It doesn't mean you have to be responsible for it, right? But you got to own it. Like, here's what it is, right? I think when we pause on owning it, then it starts to become massive and swells. And then it becomes really difficult to manage. So if someone says to me, hey man, like, I was expecting more. Okay. Well, we can probably improve the way we communicate, what you're getting or what you're doing. That way we know what your expectations are. Maybe we can get better at talking through that and navigating a conversation around expectations. Okay, great. That's enough. Like that's it right there, is to be like, we can get better at that.
And you don't know that till you say it.
And you don't know that till you hear it, right?
Right.
Till you get the feedback.
You don't know the other person's expectation.
Yeah, you don't know that.
Because that's what makes it an expectation.
And that doesn't always come at, like, the intersection that's egregious or like the end of something. It could be right in the middle of it, like, oh man, I really, really didn't do great today. Or we just had a big gig with Microsoft. Like, when I come back from those things, I immediately go into, like, okay, what can we do better? Like, how can we improve? What do we do different next time? Like, how do we learn from that? And that's an example, because it was a small group and a really private, high level event experience. We're probably not going to get a lot of feedback. Like, it's just, there's firewalls to that. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it yourself. You still have to get to a place of ownership. And if you're going to avoid ownership, I really don't think you have a positive takeaway from anything.
I'm just thinking, like, all my years teaching, I always had to drive home from wherever I was teaching home. That time I thought was some of my best time to reflect, even if it was a 10-minute drive.
Yep.
To be able to pause, think about what just happened. Because when you're in it, it's hard to
100%
know what's going on, and because you're in it.
100%.
But that time was always so critical for me to prepare myself for the next week when I would teach again.
Well, you brought this up without even actually bringing it up. Like, this narrative that we have only can get chopped away by reflection. It's the only way. So if you don't take the time to process and reflect what the feedback is, you don't ever learn.
No.
It doesn't close a loop.
Right.
There's a quote that a former business partner used to say all the time.
Even when I was teaching, I'm thinking now, I always taught like just one night a week, so it was always like 2.5 hours, something like that. That feedback during the class was just as necessary. Like, I have no idea whether they understand what I'm saying in the first place.
Yeah, you got to get it here.
Yes. Like, all right, what's going on?
Are you stuck?
Because I can't. How do you adjust what you're trying to convey when you don't have no idea whether that person is comprehending what's going on?
Yeah. Well, feedback is a two-way system, right?
Yeah.
It has to. The quote was, experience is not the best teacher. Reflection on experience is the best teacher. Yeah. Something I'm reminded of too is that especially for those of you that have clients, or you are working very closely with people. We work obviously very closely with individuals as coaches. We know, like, I mean, I remain very confidential about what, clients are specifically experiencing while we talk at length about what sort of thematically they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
but that confidentiality is important. Nonetheless, if someone doesn't give me feedback, there's nothing I can do, right? If I'm like, hey, what do you think? Or are you stuck? Or what's going on?
We automatically assume everything's okay.
We have to.
Right.
I mean, the other option would be to assume it's not okay, but then I would ask the question too.
That would just create total chaos.
But it would prompt the same action, right? So it might create chaos internally for me to be like, okay, he's unhappy, but I would still have to reach out and be like, are you unhappy?
Yeah. The only other way, and you and I had this conversation recently, is you need to be able to read the room, read the person, because the person isn't always willing to say it or can't convey the message in the moment at times.
Yeah.
But you could read the person and understand by the way they look and what they might be feeling as to where they are and whether they understand or not.
Yeah.
So there's also nonverbal feedback that takes place.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And if you put your stuff out there and the individuals that you're asking for are unwilling to give you feedback, there's your feedback.
Correct.
Right. Yep. And it might say something about them, it might say something about you, but like, there is your feedback. You kind of have to loop with that. And just be okay with that. I mean, that's certainly been my experience. I've spent a lot of time, asking for various feedback, and if you don't get it, there's no way to force it. Nor can, and feedback can mean a lot of things, right? It can mean a check-in, like, hey, is everything okay? If you get nothing, there's your feedback. It might mean like, hey, what's been your highlight? Get nothing, there's your feedback. So sometimes you got to change your method. Sometimes you might have to find a different approach, but I really think that part of the answer in this whole, like, can you be done, right? Can you truly be done with the piece of art, with whatever you're creating, with whatever process, whatever you're selling, whatever thing you're building, can be done? Then you have to get into feedback as fast as possible. It's the only way.
Well, it's also hard to begin something when you won't let something end.
Nice. Well, yeah.
Those two things are always going to be intertwined.
Yeah, and if you're listening and you're like, but I want someone to buy something, feedback is a purchase. You know how you know you did well? Somebody said yes. That's instant fucking feedback. So fast. Hey, your pitch went really well. They're not going to say that. They're not going to be like, I am really excited about your product.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, I'm in. Where do I sign? Send me the details. Like that's how it's going to work.
Yeah. And I think you do it just by giving, at least in our industry, it just keep giving.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get the feedback as to what people are looking for, what the problems are. The feedback's there. And sometimes if you get at least going with the mindset that I'm serving, that there's a degree of service.
Yeah.
I think it also opens us up to what that feedback is.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get something out of it, it's a lot harder, I think.
Right. Yeah. Ooh, it's hard to get feedback when you're asking. It's easy to get feedback when you're giving.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good anecdote to this dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the harder parts in saying like something is done and then entering into the feedback loop is shifting from like gears, from like creating to getting feedback. But that's because I'm really accustomed and familiar with feedback and the cost of that, right? Whether that was coaching soccer, like your feedback is instantaneous on a soccer field.
I said that as a preacher, like yeah, whether you want it or not, it's coming. I know when I walked out Sunday morning, it's coming.
Yep.
It's just like it's built in.
Yeah. Well, especially coaching youth, like I would walk across the field after a tough beat or even a good game. Man, I would get bad feedback after winning a game because so-and-so didn't get in the game, right? Or they got 6 minutes in the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, instant feedback. I'm just so accustomed. Like I actually don't think there's a way I could exist without a lot of feedback. Doesn't need to be positive. I definitely mess up. What I do and what we do is not for everybody.
Brace yourself then.
Oh boy. Here we go. Post podcast feedback loop. But like everybody will benefit from it if you have the right mindset around it. It is a mindset though. if you let your insecurities dominate, you will fail to meet
which
the
is
message.
When you keep the feedback loop only internal, you're more than likely it's going to be more negative than positive.
Oh man, yeah, so much so.
I've yet, if it isn't, the person's probably more narcissistic or something. They think they would never hear something negative in the first place because they already believe that they're better than.
Yeah.
But for a majority of us, that keeping it internal tends to be more negative.
Yeah. If you're already in a place where you're like, I know better, or I have the answers, or I mean, even the idea of like, well, your feedback doesn't matter to me.
Oh, but it does.
You got something to learn. And where I think the problem is,
I don't care what you think that you do.
Well, to me, the problem is not the like. I mean, there's some feedback that you just have to discount, right? Mm-hmm. You have to set to the side. But if you can't hear it,
I said it's the Olympics. You cut off both.
Yeah, ends. You have to be willing to hear it. If you're not willing to hear it, then that's an indicator that you have a problem, right? If you run a company with 50 people and you're not willing to go to them, the 50 people individually, and be like, hey, what can I do better as a leader? I know I have weak spots and blind spots. What can I do better? It's because you know.
Right. You already know.
You already know that something's wrong. Or, so it's like, I don't want to hear it. Or, here's the worst part. The other option is you believe you are so ungodly good at it that you have no need for improvement, and that's worse.
And I guarantee those people probably need a job, but that's the only reason why they stay there.
Yep.
Because I can guarantee they're not treated well.
Nope. No, because if you're at that place as a boss, you're not getting better as a boss. You're getting worse as a boss.
Correct.
As a leader. You're not a leader at that point. You're just a boss. Yeah. The same is true for artists, right? Where it's like, no, my art's perfect, or like, you're a musician and you're like putting out all this stuff, and people are like, dude, like, I don't know, man. Like, I can't really understand what you're saying. You're like, problem's you, bro. Like, if you can't hear the feedback and choose deliberately to believe whatever you believe.
And just because you get feedback doesn't mean you have to agree with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of someone like Nako, who we had on a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure he gets feedback about his music.
I'm sure, yeah. When you're public, you have to.
But he doesn't. You don't have to agree with it.
Dude, I get messages all the time about shit that I post. Like, I would get messages like, actually, there have been many examples of this, of like, don't post about that person, or, like I would post a quote from somebody and then I'd get a message or many messages that was like, well, don't post that person because they were affiliated with Nestle and Nestle fucked up this seawall. Like, wait a minute, huh?
There was something really good pre-internet days when people didn't, you didn't know everything.
Yeah.
Now everything's at your fingertips.
Well, this is also an important part of this piece. There's certainly like easy access feedback that, you can record a sound bite of a song and post it online, and people can sort of keyboard warrior feedback, some of which is
it's so easy behind the screen.
Behind the screen.
Yeah.
But the real feedback that you're going to get is going to be, I think, a bit more personal and require more. Also, you got to ask the right people for feedback. Like if you produce a piece of art and you just go to your yes friends, you're in for a rough awakening whenever it gets out into the real world. Now, hopefully it lines up. But if you surround yourself with yes people who are like, oh, you're doing a great job, like everything's great, like you're in for a world of hurt when it gets there. And I remember that from like when I was, I don't know, like 22 years old. Like, you think you're hot stuff, and then you get in front of somebody that's really good, and they're like, call me when you're fucking serious. Like that was feedback I got about a business pitch in front of a guy that later invested in a company with me, and like we did the thing. But his first comments to me after like this big pitch were like, okay, man, I can tell you're excited, but call me when you're serious. Like that was his feedback. And if that had stopped me, I wouldn't be here today.
Right.
That it has to be something to do.
Because the natural tendency for any of us is then to give meaning to the feedback, even though that might not be the intended meaning. We're going to give it. We're going to create a story around it.
Yeah. To me, feedback, if you use it effectively, like if you really loop it well, ends up creating like a little bit of a steering column for you to navigate. Right. So it is sort of that average, right? Don't admire your haters and don't love your lovers. Like, just be kind of in the middle and just kind of stay neutral. But in aggregate, both of those things are like, all right, I put this out to the world. How do people respond? Okay. All right. Well, I think let's talk more about vision for us. Let's talk more about vision. All right. Let's test that with 50 people, 50 clients. Like, hey, what does vision mean to you? Well, now our definition of vision is very different than it was before. It just sat between us. It's got to go to the people that we serve. And I think business owners, entrepreneurs, creatives want to exist in a place where they don't have feedback. They just live in their dream world and create. And it's an ideal. That'd be awesome to just like create magic and then put it on the internet. It sells for thousands. But the reality is that it doesn't work like that. And good musicians know that. I think about people who have lasted, like two artists that come to mind who have lasted multiple decades, Drake and Taylor Swift. Both of them have engaged their audience to get feedback often. So it makes them great.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson did that. I know Prince did that. Like, so many. I just watched the movie the other day. Freddie Mercury, Queen.
Yeah.
Right. Heavily engaged with the audience. And part of what I think in artistry happens at the highest level, the reason, in my opinion, the reason why, like artists have, let's take like a Freddie Mercury. Who knows the full story because it was just put into a movie and it kind of exaggerates. But that Freddie Mercury was partying and doing all that. Well, why? I think that artists engage in those kind of activities because it puts you back in a feedback loop. Like it puts you back in like creating for the people that you're making songs for.
Yeah, someone like him, it's very easy because he was so big at that time, even in that movie. Like there's such a distance between even where the audience is and where he is.
Yeah,
it's automatically going to create a gap.
You lose touch. Like if, dude, this is true for so many artists, right? They get successful, and then their music becomes like wildly disconnected from the everyman that they were built on.
Welcome to corporate world USA.
Totally.
The head is always disconnected from the body.
Yeah. The CEOs that I have seen be really good are they know to come back to ground level and get feedback. The first one that comes to mind is the CEO of T-Mobile. That guy certainly gets a lot of feedback, but he tweets so much, and there's like thousands of different people that are interacting with it. Is T-Mobile the first name that people think of with cell phones? No. But they have certainly carved their space in the industry. And he has done a good job of like coming down and feeling like a part of the organization, not like the ivory tower kind of guy.
Yep.
But it's all feedback.
Yep. Yeah.
He'd be interesting to talk to. T-Mobile.
I have the little theme music that they play on their commercials, but I can't do it. There's a T-Mobile.
Are you about to give him feedback right now? Hey, T-Mobile CEO, here's your feedback.
I forget what it is, but it's on all their commercials.
Yeah. Well, one way that I learned about this in economics, I studied economics in college, was like the market will give you feedback, right? The market will tell you. If you sign a client, thumbs up, like feedback. If nobody buys, like crickets, feedback. You know, something's going on. You just have to be willing to put your neck out there. And the object of saying like it's done or it's done enough or it's good enough for right now is to get to that feedback faster. Because in many ways,
well, I saw that like even a corporation like Target earlier this summer pulled back on selling Pride stuff in their store in the month
Probably
of
got a
June.
lot of feedback for that.
But the feedback was the market was saying we don't want it anymore.
Yeah.
And so they pulled it back. And then they're criticized by the other side.
Yeah.
But the market determined where they go.
Yeah, where it is. Yeah. Yeah, I think that feedback as a whole is your relationship with feedback is a determinant of your long term. So the goal is not better. Hold on. Let me think about how to say this. The goal is not feedback that's more positive. The goal is more feedback. That's what will catalyze growth. So if you are trying to grow more, if you're trying to grow your business more, if you're trying to grow, like make a brighter vision, trying to get more family, like it doesn't matter what it is.
It also gets you over the hump of being afraid of it.
You're just in it.
Yeah.
You will need a lot of feedback, more frequent feedback. So it's a frequency game, not a quality game.
Yes.
You can be absolute shit at music, absolute shit at art, shit at business, shit at anything. And if you practice it enough and incorporate feedback into that process, you'll get very good very fast. Way more than most people will, because most people will sit and tinker on like Fruit Loops and build beats and do all this shit and try to build hundreds of beats and like musical instrumentals. You have a library of 100. Okay, great. Like what does that mean? That means nothing until somebody buys it. So like, why is it not out in the world? Why is it? Because you're afraid of feedback.
Yeah. Endings and beginnings. How did we begin?
I don't know. With Eric Cantona's speech.
That's right.
I love football.
I wonder what his feedback was.
Man. Well, there it is, right? The post was like, I don't know. He broke the internet with the speech. It was that bad of a speech. I mean,
and yet everyone went to listen to it.
Still, I mean, it's still bad feedback, right? It's not, but it's feedback. I don't know whatever happened after that.
Yeah, and we never know the motivation behind the person. Was that his motivation all along? To just say something dumb?
Be weird?
That's entirely possible.
It's totally possible.
With celebrity, who already has an audience.
Be polarizing?
Possible. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that was polarizing. That was just weird.
Confusing is what it was. Yeah, I'm still very confused by that. I think he's probably still confused by that.
I love football.
I love football. Is it the most like heavy applause? Like everyone's looking around, slow pause. Like,
is it time? Are we supposed to go?
I'm just checking to make sure other people are clapping. Okay, all right, here we go. No one knows what to do. Okay, well, I think if we were to summate this,
I'm going to say, bring it home.
If we were to summate this, we made two big points that I think are really salient. One is that saying that you're done with a project, with art, with creating, with a vision, with whatever, is really important to then getting feedback. And feedback is really what creates iteration. And iteration is really important to success. So I think that tracks to kind of our theme today. And that is something I really like discussing. The second one is that you also have a responsibility in the feedback loop once you get whatever response is to then interpret that appropriately, filter it appropriately, use it, and wield it. The reflection piece to make that feedback a positive, utilized thing, object in the iteration.
Even if it felt critical, you can make it positive.
Yes. So like, you got to say it's done to start the feedback loop, which is the only way to get successful.
Yeah. So, someone telling you something sucks is not feedback. That's just someone.
No, that's criticism.
Yes.
So you got to say it's done. That opens up a feedback loop, and you need feedback to be successful. That's like one. And then track two would be, once you get feedback, your responsibility is to reflect on that and to use that for iteration. But if you don't have someone else involved in the feedback loop, it's not a feedback loop. It's a delusion.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And if it's a delusion, or if you're stuck before, like you're not able to be like it's done, time to get out of your own way. It really is. Like it really.
It's time to love football.
Love football. I love football. It was, yeah. I'm still so confused about that. Anyway, go check out that speech. We are so grateful for you tuning in. If you have a moment, we'd appreciate you going to the bottom of wherever you're watching this, Spotify, Apple, beyond that. Give us a review. We love 9 stars if you could do it, but I think you could only do 5. We'll settle for 5. But drop in a comment like, what did you love? How did it help you? Send us a note. You can follow on Instagram if you go to anywhere that you can find us, Facebook, Instagram. Like, check us out. My handle is at Aaron Velke. Yours is at Marty Noki.
Yeah.
So check us out there. We'd appreciate any of the feedback you have about the podcast, things you want to hear, things you want to learn about, things you're struggling with are all great to share so that we know what would be helpful to you. And just on the theme of feedback, know that we value things like reviews and messages and all that, but you're also welcome to ask for particular subjects, topics, artists, guests, anything like that, so that we know what you want, because ultimately this is for you.
And we'll talk about anything.
And we'll probably talk about anything. Yeah. Today started with Eric Cantona's UEFA President Award speech. Okay. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.